Hi.
Hello, everyone.
Hi there.
Welcome to a live discussion with Danielle and I. I have decided to actually branch out beyond my Modern Muses Facebook group, which is just designed for women only, to also do this on my personal Facebook page because a few people have been interested in the content that we've been producing. And it's certainly not gender specific, and especially this topic. I think this is garnering a lot of attention and a lot of questions, a lot of interest. And I just want to say welcome. So if you're just joining us, please say hello in the chat so we know that you're here. And we would love to have you engage in the way that you feel comfortable in this discussion. But there's a lot of, we were just talking, there's a lot of ground to cover, and we
Oh
want
my
to do our
gosh.
best to sort of set the stage here and do our best to sort of explain nervous system resilience in a very dysregulating world that we have. So before I go into that, I would love to introduce my guest speaker. This is Danielle Ivans-Fishman. She is a trained educator and coach with over 20 years of experience in the realms of human potential, personal and professional development, and entrepreneurship. And her trainings and philosophies combine the power of psychobiology, developmental neuroscience, attachment theory, and energy medicine, and she is passionate and dedicated to the pursuit of healing and balance within the individual so that we can find our way back to our true nature. So welcome, Danielle. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, that sounded good. That was a mouthful.
This is my
Ah,
first time speaking, so I wanna. Hopefully, that I got through to that.
perfect.
So I would love to actually start this conversation with this beautiful quote that I actually posted online, which is,
Mm,
"Safety is much more than the absence of threat. Safety is the
mm,
presence of connection."
mm.
And that's from Dr. Stephen Porges.
Wonderful.
Porges, however you pronounce that.
Yeah.
And I
Mm,
love that as a starting point
yeah.
because we're not just talking about feeling okay in our nervous system and regulated. We also want to feel connected
Yeah.
to the world around us. So it's not just a lack of danger that we want to experience in ourselves, but an experience of connection.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I love that. That was perfect. Thanks for
Yes.
bringing that in because the minute
Mhm.
you just said those words, I just felt that. Ooh, yeah, that's right. It almost just hit me immediately in the body. And I think that's what all of us have been conditioned out of, which is really just understanding what is safety in the modern world. Like we just safety, oh, we're safe. We live in a home. We have all of our needs met. And yet we have been bypassing that it's not that easy. And that we have these
Mm,
nervous systems that are constantly speaking to us and saying, I
mm,
don't feel safe. So
mm.
thanks for giving me a chance to talk about these things.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
bring up actually a perfect thing in our sort of modern world where we have a
Yeah.
lot of creature comforts and
Mm.
people feel
Mm.
extremely dysregulated, highly anxious,
Yeah.
disconnected.
Mhm.
And this is a huge problem. There's a huge problem
Yeah.
right now. I want to talk about, like, especially in our modern world, we feel like this. We should feel better, and yet we feel worse, and that is sort of
Yeah.
a cyclical problem.
Yeah, right?
Yeah, I
It's
love. How do you feel about? What do you think the sort of modern malaise is going on with us?
well, I mean, I'm gonna I'll just speak off the cuff,
Yeah.
and it's hard for us to realize this because there is a lot of privilege, and when we have a lot of privilege, there's modern malaises. Let's go back to that. I Yeah, I think it goes back to the body. I think that sometimes when we do have a lot of privilege and we assume that all of our needs are met, and they are in abundance, again, it's really hard to get back to the fact that in our private spaces, for those of us that have a lot, it's like, then why am I feeling this way? Whether it appears as anxiety, whether it appears as depression, mental illness, physical illness, chronic physical tension.
Hmm.
If we all sit here in the comfort of whether it's privacy or with people that you trust, we could make a list of things, and all of these things go back to our body and basically this all powerful nervous system that's been telling us, no, I'm not okay. I'm not safe. And it's not about like lions, tigers, and bears anymore. I mean, our saber-toothed tigers are now our boss, potentially
Hmm.
relationship conflict, potentially conflict with our kids, conflict with a lot of things that we just really don't give ourselves a chance to be truthful about. So it's about truth telling. And I think starting with, you know, our bodies, it's a way to really get clear. Not an easy
Mm,
way, because it's dismantling a lot of persona and a lot of unintentional dishonesty in our lives,
mm,
all unintentional. So
mm.
yeah, yeah,
So, how did you feel? You've been interested in the personal growth world for a long time, but
yeah.
what was the sort of tipping point for you around connecting your sense of safety in the world with your nervous system and the
Mm.
reactions that your body was having? What was the interest for you?
Well, it was all kind of just I happened upon it. You know, I was in the business world. I was in school. I was really interested in psychology. I've been in therapy my whole life, so I've definitely been a seeker. I've definitely been out there learning and educating myself in many different ways. And I kind of just summarize it. It took a huge life transition in my. It was speaking to me the whole time, and at the time, the science wasn't out there really assisting us in finding the path to real healing. But it took a big life transition. It was exiting an 18-year relationship. And it was just like what happened was I had so much information, so much knowledge, or so I thought, but my body just took over. And so being in my 30s, being healthy and actually the most fit I had ever been, my whole right side started contracting, and
Mm,
no one could tell me what it was. So it really took that, the life transition. Uh, it just took that to wake me up, and going to chiropractors and getting all of this, like, what's going on? Why am I seizing up? I can't move anymore. Well, I can't go to the gym anymore. I can't. So my body led me to what is this? And eventually I was led um, to this idea that, number one, we have this automatic nervous system, this autonomic nervous system that's in most of the time, in my cases, it was in such high levels of fight, flight, sympathetic arousal, which is not the good kind of arousal.
mhm,
And it really was my body. So I think that's why I said earlier, it's like, listen to our bodies, get really real with what they're telling us. So it led me down the path to really even change my whole trajectory, to say, this is a missing piece in the health and wellness world. And so let's do this differently, and let me get out there. And so I started going towards coaching in a different way, learning some somatic modalities that are really helpful in just the healing process. So
mm.
it was my body saying, screw you, this is enough. Figure out how to release this. And yeah, so that was kind of a short version of,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think you're also speaking to a lot of people's stories around
yeah.
like I'm very well therapized. Like I could cognitively I could
Yes.
cognitively sort of name the parts of me that have, been wounded or I
Yeah,
have childhood trauma or I have this or I have
that's right.
that. But it feels it's a top-down approach, right?
Yeah,
And there's a lot of value in that, to sort of understand where you come from. But then bridging the gap between the understanding and like building the somatic resonance of how you actually are feeling
yeah,
about this and where you're holding tension, um,
yeah,
and your general state,
yes,
uh, and as opposed to sort of traits, like, for instance, there's like the sort of how I'm feeling now, but like how am I holding my body throughout my whole life?
yes,
um,
yes,
and I think this is a big challenge for people because
yeah,
their first thought is to sort of cognitively understand what's going on,
yes, yes,
and then but really at the disconnect to their bodies.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and so I'm glad you brought that up. So there is in the world of healing and trauma, and thank God for this now. We specify this. We specify the top-down approaches, which are cognitive, and this isn't saying one is better than the other. This is just a lot of us have been doing a lot of that, and it works, and it does bring things together and helps kind of create some structure around what we've been through or what we're going through. Very helpful, top down. But the piece that's been opened up through a lot of the trauma greats and the healers that are out there now, like Bessel van der Kolk and Peter Levine, and a lot of these somatic pioneers, we call that bottom up. So these are bottom up approaches, and they're body approaches, they're somatic approaches. EMDR is one, brain spotting, and there's many. Yoga is considered a bottom up approach to healing, limbic therapy. So we now know that it's both. And so in some cases, for those of us that have had a lot of early childhood trauma, and anyone that has, been through horrific things or long-term, majorly stressful events their whole life, we need to start with a bottom-up approach, because that's what dysregulates the nervous system and causes chronic. So trauma causes even more chronic dysregulation. And a nervous system that is just, whether we are cognitive of this or not, our nervous system is in constant threat.
Yeah.
So, and now we are so lucky to say that we have so many modalities, and based on the person, and really finding a customized approach to helping that person. You come up with a plan and you use all different approaches. But I tend to really advocate for going into the body as soon as possible, while having some wonderful people to talk to.
Yeah.
There's a lot of amazing top-down approaches. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
Yes, and when we're talking about trauma, there's this word is a bit elusive and all-encompassing, but I think it's really important to talk about these sort of long-term sustained traumas, especially like CPSD, complex PTSD, which is sort of these starting probably from a developmental stage when we were growing up, and this misattunement of maybe from our parents, or being in an environment that had a lot of threat, or feeling physically or mentally unsafe, and that kind of a perpetual dysregulation then has a kind of compounding effect on how we are as adults. And we may not be able to point back to one thing, which is like, oh, this happened, and this is why I have this way, which could be very convenient, in specific traumas where it's like there was a singular event happening. That brings explainability to why you might feel dysregulated or under threat. But oftentimes most people are experiencing CPSD, which is sort of this compounded micro traumas that leave us feeling under threat, and we don't know why.
That's right. Yeah. And that's where shame, like as soon as you said that, and I loved how you said that, for those of us that have that, again, some of us do this privately or with very close people, and women, for the most part, some of us have a little bit more freedom to say, wow, this is just a really uncomfortable time. But, that is a big perplexing place to be, especially if we do know, if we've had big specific traumas, which I don't even like how they categorize this. And in the trauma world, they'll say big T trauma, little t trauma, or they'll say primary trauma and secondary trauma. Right there, to me, that, excuse my language, pisses me off. Not because
it's really a judgment. Like, how will I, how do I categorize what happened to me as big or little?
And so both are horrendous, and it's those little micro patterns that a lot of us hold that, again, aren't as cognitively known, and not to mention developmentally, a lot of what happened to us before our brains were even able to develop memories around it, that those very, very earlier, if not in utero moments of how we were developing, we carry that, and it's a lot. And this is it's a challenge, sometimes a big challenge for some of us. Yet we can get through this, and especially we have such beautiful privilege in this day and age with all that we have available, all that we know, all that's out there, so that we can all support each other. And I love what Ram Dass says. It's one of the pictures I have in my office now, which is like, we're all just really walking each other home. And for me, that's part of the healing journey. To reduce shame and to just get into why is it that I'm constantly dysregulated, but for some, everything's okay.
Yeah. And that is something interesting, that it's, what is it costing us to stay in these states
Mm.
And this is mainly I'm working with in this women's group, but
Yeah.
you can kind of look to see what your coping mechanisms are under stress.
Yeah.
Are
Yeah.
you developing addictive patterns?
Yeah.
Are you self-abandoning? Are you drinking a little too much? Are
Right.
you shopping a little too much? Are
Yeah.
you looking for something outside of yourself to soothe kind of
Yeah.
this inner world? And
Yeah.
these are the tells that you're probably not in a space of being resourced,
Yeah.
and the resiliency that you want to have towards life's, things towards life's, like, unknowns.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and if you're perpetually low grade dysregulated, like you're always like a little off, you're going to be
Yeah.
reaching to these things more and more. And it has
That's
this
right.
kind of compounding effect. Do you
Yes.
want to sort of talk with that about this?
Yeah.
I want to talk about, really about this nervous system resiliency, right?
Mm.
And when it's
Mhm. Mhm.
compromised, our capacity is changed. So maybe you want to kind of go in
Yeah.
on this a little bit and let me know when you want me to pull up your
Well, I was
slide.
just gonna say, pull that puppy up.
All right.
I think for some of us we're visual. So
Yes.
this is a slide. There's a lot on it. For those of you looking at this, I just want you to kind of just sit back and take it in. Don't try to look at the details. But if you're a detail person and that regulates you, go ahead, do it. Do whatever feels good. And I want to just explain the nervous system quickly in a basic way. So this is based on polyvagal theory. There's some other things added in by Dr. Stephen Porges, and I'm going to recommend a video for people to potentially watch after this by his son Seth Porges. So I'll just put the little piece here. It's a 20 minutes of probably the best education you'll get. So just look up on YouTube Seth Porges, Porges, and safety. That's it. So I'm just going to give you the basics for those of you that haven't seen anything like this and you're like, what the hell is this? Excuse my language. So we have basically three states. I'm going to simplify it. Social engagement would be the green zone. It would be where we're in safety. We are able to rest and digest. In this state, for the most part, this is where we're actually able to connect with humans, truly connect, truly be present with ourselves and others. And if you look at the whole chart and say, really, Danielle, that's where we're able to, yeah, you can see why it's so hard to connect, why it's so hard to connect with ourselves and others, because guess where we live for the most part? We live above that zone. So our goal in healing is to be able to feel stress, and stress would be, as you can see, kind of like the little roller coaster hill there. We get triggered and we start to go from baseline, which is called ventral vagal. We start to go up into a natural stress state. Being in sympathetic stress isn't a bad thing. We need to get mobilized and we need to get motivated. So a certain level of that is great. In fact, if you see the little low level swirly thing, that's where we want to be. We want to dip in and out of that natural flow of a little energy. I'm in a little bit of a sympathetic place. I'm getting things done, to, okay, let me regulate, let me rest, let me balance, let me go back up. That's ideal. Who really stays there? I'm working on it. So, but here's what happens for most of us is that we get triggered and we start to go up into what we call the basic fight flight state. Some of us are more fleers, some of us are more fighters. It just comes out in behavior. So we're just going to just be really gentle about this. And then if we are more of a dysregulated person, if we have trauma, if we're working with a lot, we tend to keep going up to a highly sympathetic state. And as you can see, that little mountain goes up into the blue. So this is where a lot of us have a lot of our issues. This is where we are immobilized. This is where we're in shutdown. All of the really difficult emotions like depression and collapse, suicidality, thoughts of suicide, hopelessness, addiction. This happens up in the blue zone. And what I was telling Chrissy earlier, and I wish I would have known this, is that we can function and look like we're functioning really well up here. That's what's
Mm.
interesting about being a human being. So, so this is really our stress map in a sense. And if you look at that little squiggle up in the top, I guess it would be the right hand for you guys. This is what we call the PTSD cycle. People that are just more highly dysregulated, people that are working on their trauma, people that just have to constantly manage their stress, they live here. They live in high sympathetic up into dorsal. I just call it the dorsal state. So that is extremely exhausting.
Mm.
To the right of this chart, and this is where I
Exhausting physically, like it
yes,
really exhausts your adrenals,
yes.
exhausts you at a very physical level.
Yeah. And so there's a lot to go here, to go through here. But I think
Mm.
one thing to start to realize as you're opening up to getting to know your nervous system, there's a lot of wonderful work out there on how to befriend your nervous system. You know, the right side of this chart is kind of mapping out really what the body is showing us at each state. So in a highly sympathetic state, we're going to have a lot of decrease in the things that really help us feel good in life, that help us feel I mean, by the way, sexuality and being able to connect to any type of healthy sexuality, the higher stressed we are, it's just not physiologically possible. So
Mhm.
we just lose a lot of functioning the higher we go in our stress.
Mm, mm.
Not to mention when we're up in the other zone, the blue zone, this is where chronic issues happen, mental issues. Some of us come out and start to show more of a mental, more mental issues, depression.
Mhm.
Others, it goes right into the body, and eventually, God, it just will go to disease. So autoimmune issues. So I'm just going to stop there. Yes,
Cardiovascular issues.
yes,
Yeah. Then
yeah,
it's funny. It's very not funny. It's very interesting that you talk about the functioning in the freeze zone,
yeah,
because when people typically think about this, it mean it they I think they typically think that you're like, catatonics
yeah. That I'm
sort of
like, I
state,
just
right?
can't move. I can't get up out of bed, which for
Yeah.
some is the case. But
But
no,
in some instances, like this state has a purpose, right? For instance, like if you're a parent
yeah,
and your child gets hurt, you
yes,
can't collapse with it. Like you're like, all right,
mm,
I maybe there's something that's happening, and you're like, I need to focus right now, and then I will have,
that's
and then
right.
I'll freak out later, right? So I'm going to pause on the freak out, and I'm going to
Yeah,
focus. So that sort of
yeah,
compartmentalization of things has a value and has a purpose,
yes,
right? So we can attend to emergencies, right? But
that's right.
in non-emergencies we
That's right.
don't really want to be there, in a normal healthy response you'll respond to the emergency of say like your child,
That's right.
and then after, when they're safe, then you'll probably collapse and cry and
That's right.
shake and have this physiological response
Yeah.
to the overwhelm of the body and the hormones and cortisol and all that's happening.
Yes.
And yeah, and so, when you're saying like these people, sometimes you're actually prized for like compartmentalizing your
Yeah.
emotions. Like think of someone like a Navy SEAL who
Yeah.
has the capacity to sort of disengage with their emotional needs and sort of stay focused on a very like a critical task, right? I would like to see the data on how much they're thriving when they go home in their home life, if
Yeah.
they
That's right.
go back, or they really stay in that disengaged
That's right.
state with their emotions, because it's
Yeah.
really hard to be in that place and then come down.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. And it's so physiologically taxing to be up in that immobilized place. And if we're functioning in those places long term, so we are built for stress per se, like you just said, and all of these states are actually adaptive. So
Yeah.
thank God that we have these abilities. So in a sense, when we get stuck and we're in chronic places mentally or physically, if we just look at it through the nervous system and through our body without analyzing it or pathologizing it, I like to kind of say, listen, our body has gotten stuck. It's gotten stuck at what is a unhealthy homeostasis. It's almost like the body needs to be just held differently, worked with differently, to start to teach it again how to go up into these high levels of stress, if not shut down, and then learn to come back down into the social engagement, into the green zone.
Mm.
And that's where all of us are learning all of these wonderful tools. I bet everyone listening, for the most part, has their toolbox, has the things that they do to really help them. In our worlds, we call it self-care, self-love, self-honoring. So those are the things we're doing to get back to the green. But then,
Or
yeah,
you're using coping mechanisms, so you're kind
and
of left,
that.
right?
That's good. I'm glad you said that, because in my own self work and my work with clients, I love to take everything we're using, which could be a drink, which could be anything, and I love to hold it up and say, this is what we've used to the best of our ability. There's no
Mhm.
shame. I mean,
Yeah.
and so I'm really different with that, whether it's eating, and I've had eating issues, and I've had a really, really stressful human experience. And so no judgment. This is what
Yes.
we have been doing to try to get back to the green to the
Yes.
best of our ability.
Yes. Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah,
So
I think that's I want to like plus one that because
yeah,
I also have used, some
yeah,
addictive natures
yeah.
and coping mechanisms that maybe weren't the most healthy, but they were there to sort of solve a problem, which was I
Yeah,
was
that's right.
dysregulated and I could
Right.
not figure out how to do it on my own in a healthy
Yes.
way. So I used an unhealthy way.
Yeah.
And I guess what I want to bring this to like the some people that are watching. I think that this is where we see a lot of like activism burnout happening because they're
Mm,
so
mhm,
fired up around change and
mm,
political uh, political issues or environmental
yes.
issues, and there's you need to have a surge of energy to sort of sustain this, but it
Yeah.
really is an unsustainable place to be long
Yes.
term without costing you something of
Oh
your
my
body
God.
and your mental health. And
Yes.
so when people talk about self-care very flippantly, what we're really talking about is like a nervous system
Yeah.
regulation so that you can function long term.
Oh my gosh. I mean, really, if I could just get into everyone's heads and their hearts and their bodies, I would say take what you're using and start to see if you can put foundational things in there that have to do more with this emerging science, which and this emerging wisdom around safety and what feels good. If you're out there and you are out there emblazoned with whatever you're doing in the world, whatever you're out there in purpose doing, to realize that it's not sustainable, like you said, and whatever it is, whether it's you're being a parent or you're caring for family members or you're out there fighting for what's right in the world, really to understand that the body needs to come back down. It needs to be able to be in that as much of a restful place as possible. And I'm sure all of us can really sense when we've hit that. Well, actually, here's the interesting thing. Some of us can't, and I think that's
Mm.
also a cultural, social thing where we've been prized
Hmm.
for being able to do it all. We're living in a really individualistic society, and I think we have been kind of sold, if I can say, that we're more prized if we do it ourselves. If we can, we were talking about regulation, which I
Hmm.
think is a really great point. I'm going to do it
Yes.
myself. I'm going to go self-regulate. And very important, by the way, very important to learn that.
Hmm.
But the power, we're ultra social. We're dyadic creatures. We do need each other's, dare I say this? We are dependent,
Yeah.
interdependent on each other to assist in this process. This
Yes.
isn't an individual process. We can know it, we can do it ourselves to a point, but we always need each other.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I would love to talk more about that. But before that, I would love
Mhm.
to um, give people some very
Mm.
clear tools and easy tools around managing sort of this vagal nerve. So maybe we could talk a little bit about this vagus nerve that sort of
Mhm.
lives is sort of the
Yeah.
longest nerve in our body, this sort of this
Yeah.
central to like our gut health and our physiological health that sends all these signals of safety and organ control to our
Yeah.
bodies. And
Yeah.
when the tone is low, we are more apt to depression,
Yes.
ADHD,
Yes.
what is other some chronic
Oh
heart
gosh. Well,
issues,
sexual
um,
dysfunction.
sexual dysfunction. Yeah,
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 a lot of neurological issues in and around on the minor end. Just not able to focus, not able to remember.
yes.
Everything suffers in a sense. So yeah, tell me what were your specific questions. Do you want to just go into?
Yeah, I would love so maybe we can talk about some of
Yeah.
these easy wins
Mm,
of to sort of bring back this connection to the mind gut, right? That
mhm.
there's a sort of brain and body
Yeah.
connection. I
Yeah.
know vagal tone, like singing, is something. So maybe you want to talk
Mm,
about what that does
yeah.
with the vocal cords, the vocal
Yeah.
cord resonance.
Just to start there, I love that. For those of us that sing or are more bashful, or hey, you don't have to have any good tone at all. So forget about if you can sing or not, because my God, there's so many amazing singers, and not all of us are that. So what Stephen Porges, who is the discoverer of this theory and the nerves themselves, the different branches of them, so prosody is huge. So prosody is a fancy way of saying our voice and others' voices. So when we were a child, we were soothed by soothing voices. It soothed our entire system. So the voice, the human voice, goes right to our nervous system.
Mm.
So again, that can be amazingly powerful when harnessed well. And also, hey, why do we get dysregulated when someone uses a tone? When our partner uses that tone, or when our boss
Mm.
gets harsh, because it goes both ways. So that's how
Mm.
powerful tone is.
Mm.
Sticking with the harnessing the power of using it for calming, humming. I mean, for any of you that do any type of humming or any type of practice in breathing where you start to use tone or sound and you feel the vibrations, that can be really calming. Just going in the car if you're a little bashful and just start to sing, start to listen like that. Our own tone can calm us.
Mm.
Just like when we're talking, if we pay attention a little bit to our voice, you'll see mothers or people talk to babies. Now, oh, baby, oh, hi, honey. Or we'll do this to our dog or our cat or animals. What are we doing? We're actually already in the wisdom of, I want to relax. I want to create safety for the being in front of me.
Mm.
So just remember, we have that magic power to just really regulate our tone, to help others regulate, but it regulates us when we're doing it.
Yes.
So singing, humming, finding a practice where you really do find that and feel the power of tone. So
Yes.
prosody is huge. And when we get really stressed, it actually says that on the top of the chart. Our face will kind of become very blank and our tone will become monotone. So that is
Mm.
actually a sign of extreme dysregulation. I don't know if you've ever experienced that with a
Yeah.
teacher or someone. It's like their tone is just there's no emotion and
Or a
it's
very flat affect.
flat
Yeah.
affect.
It
So
causes distress in people because
yeah,
we are used to sort of monitoring and measuring
yeah,
facial expression with engagement.
yeah.
So yeah, it's so true.
It's so true. So right there, I mean, there's two pathways to so the two senses that are the biggest pathways to the nervous system, regulation and dysregulation,
Mm.
are the ears and the eyes. So
Mm.
if we just remember that we can be most regulated and dysregulated by the eyes, by our sight and our sound,
Mm.
I think, again, we can harness the power of those two senses, because I want to focus more on the regulation. We can, so those of us that love music, those of us that just really want to say, I need to go and just turn on some calming music to have it in the background. For me, I listen to this or I watch this great YouTube channel. It's called Primal Earth. And all the time, people that know me in my house, I always have one of their beautiful drone footage, naturescape, beautiful melodic classical videos on. And I
Mm.
have that in the background, and my nervous system will just pick that up, and it's a regulator for me.
Mm.
So these are kind of hacks, but they are, our eyes and our ears directly connect into our nervous system. And on the flip side, that's something I want everyone to consider. It's like that will dysregulate you. So really consider your environment now and say, oh, you know what? Maybe that's why I get so dysregulated when I'm at my family's and everyone's arguing and talking about politics. And I'm just
Mhm.
like,
Yeah.
yeah,
And I think it's a nice experiment if people want to run on their own, which
yeah,
is if I sort of tense everything right now and build this
mm,
embodied expression of tension and like sort of inner conflict,
yeah,
how quickly my state changes from one from relaxation to anxiety, right? So I have
yeah,
a physiological tension and response, and then it creates an emotional response inside of me, which
yes,
is one of anxiety. So the
yeah,
idea that we don't need to even recognize our emotions first, but if I sort of
yeah,
build this relaxation techniques,
yes,
then I can see the contrast of where I was. So if I I start doing sort of deep breath or breath work, which is, even if you do a simple one, which is a longer breath out than a breath in,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So 4 in, 8 out, and then
Yes.
and maybe with some tone, like like some kind of
Mm,
sound, you'll probably feel that something is released, something is relaxed.
yes.
And then you might also observe that your emotional state has changed to one of relaxation as well.
Yeah,
So,
that's great. I have to say, I'm glad you mentioned that because breath work is profoundly powerful. So I'm definitely not speaking against breath work, but you just made something really important, specific,
mhm,
that there is a very specific breath and very specific breath techniques that are to help you come down into more of a socially engaged rest and relax and digest place.
mhm,
And that would be breathing in fully and breathing out. The out breath needs to begin to just be a little bit longer, a little bit slower than the in breath. So
mhm,
you do just 4 of those where you just I mean, we can just try it now because I
mhm.
think all of us can use that. So again,
Yes.
just finding our seat. Maybe we can just kind of go into just allowing the shoulders to drop, giving permission to the muscles around the eyes to relax, just letting the skin on the face and the forehead just smooth out, softening the eyes again, letting the jaw relax, the tongue just find a nice comfortable place in the mouth. And let's just allow again the throat to soften, the shoulders to just find that nice, comfy, cushiony place in the socket. And just begin to feel the body as it is, finding that comfort. And before we even go into the breath, it's interesting to know that our bodies will allow relaxation in their own time. So we don't have to expect anything from the
Mm,
body. And those little micro muscle tensions, they'll kind of keep coming back because that's really what happens. We have automated tension that's just built in. So, as easy as just allowing and giving permission to the body to relax while you're sitting at your desk or in your car, and just allowing the breath to come in as gently and as fully as you'd like. So, just bring a breath in through the nose or the mouth, wherever it's comfortable, and just let the breath out. So, we don't want to control the breath yet. And just let that breath in again, feel it come in. And then begin to let the breath out again.
mm,
And let's allow it to come in again, imagining that you're opening and filling. And now let that out breath just linger a little longer, a little easier. Bringing the breath in again, filling, opening, shoulders relaxed. Allowing that out breath to just come out a little longer, a little easier. One more, filling, letting that in breath open. Let that out breath move out slower, a little longer. And then just come a little bit back into the body again. Let the shoulders move. Let the wrists twirl a bit if you have access to your ankles. So we're just coming right back in, easy, slow. See if the neck wants to move. When does the body get a chance to just have a few minutes to slow down?
yeah.
And I love that we could get technical about it, and I part of me wants to start to do that, but just to give that awareness of what that feels like, to
Mhm,
just know that basic breath. And
mhm.
yeah.
It's so wonderful because a lot of people are reticent to do any kind of meditation. I think
Mm,
the idea sometimes feels anxious, or they feel like they're not doing it right, and it comes with a
yeah,
lot of internal judgments.
yeah,
But this feels like something doable with very limited
yeah,
instructions on how to do it right.
yeah,
And this has a really calming effect on us. And it's often just, it feels too easy to sometimes
yeah, sometimes it
even
does.
do, right? Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
this is really where things start. Our
yeah,
breath is a modulator for our state.
Yes.
When we
Yes.
breathe fast, we
Yes.
build in a system of threat.
Yes.
So
That's right.
breathing slow literally brings us back to sort of de-escalates.
Yes, it
Mhm,
does. And I mean, I led that, and I honestly felt that in my body.
mhm,
And so it's interesting. I'm forgetting I'm doing a course now, and there is a beautiful Japanese psychotherapy, and what they're proving now through some studies of this method, and I wish I remembered what it was, that he suggests that we don't go into breath consciously, that we actually start with body scan, with muscle relaxation.
mm,
That in a sense, some of us, and this is me included, I'll sometimes do my breath work, and then through breath work as the first entry to I want to calm myself, we can dysregulate ourselves because we're not entering into breath work regulated.
mm, mm,
So that if you can find a body scan practice, and I've actually integrated that into my own practice, where even when I'm sitting with clients, because if I'm dysregulated with a client based on their emotion, which because I'm a feeler, so I've been using this in session, and it just, the minute I feel like I'm over feeling or I'm not, I just go, relax my shoulders,
mm,
soften my eye muscles, and I just give myself permission and prompts. And then I'm telling you, it's amazing. All of a
mm,
sudden, automatically, my breath just, it
mm,
just starts to move with me. Our breath is, I mean, it's our closest companion, and it will help us and be with us. So,
mm.
yeah.
It's wonderful. I think they've also done studies too of just in crowds how you build this sort of coherence,
Oh,
like heart coherence or like breath coherence, and
yes.
certainly inside of dance, inside of tango,
Yeah.
the idea is not that you're connecting. The idea is that you're actually connecting on something like primal.
Oh,
Right? Not
yeah.
just that
Yes.
we like the music together or
Yes.
our bodies fit,
Yes.
but that like we're breathing and regulating together, that
Yes.
we're feeling the same sensation and we're able to like listen in the same way, listen to each other in the same way. And
Amazing.
it's this is I think why partner dance, especially maybe Argentine tango, can be so
Yeah.
powerful for people, is that they feel like
Mhm.
they're in communion with someone else, and
Mm.
it's just the most beautiful thing to be regulated with someone else.
Oh, it's everything. It's
Yeah.
everything. I think the term is limbic resonance.
Hmm.
It's this idea, and that's why in a lot of group settings, if you're ever in a group, they'll specifically put everyone in circles, because what happens is that will automatically start to connect us on that limbic system level and
Hmm.
attune us together. That's why you'll see powerful group work done in circles, and why the ancients knew this. It was just
Hmm.
kind of like they were, I mean, talk about embodied. If we can, and then if we compare ourselves to them and ourselves now, even those of us that are in the work of healing and embodiment, we all have to admit how disembodied we still are. That's our
Yes.
biggest, and also, and of course, Dr. Sue Johnson, a top attachment expert,
Mhm.
would agree with you. Dance and the ability to dance, it's a metaphor for also relationship. To
Yeah.
be, so you in your community, you guys know this firsthand.
Mhm.
That's where magic happens.
Yes. And, like, good segue into sort of relational
Mhm.
regulation, which is,
Mhm.
we talked a lot about sort of personal regulation, individual
Yeah,
regulation, because it's not always available that we have someone else
yeah,
to use as a way of kind of modulating how we are. And I think this oftentimes this gets conflated as like codependency.
yeah,
And
okay.
it's very distinct, right? It's the
Mhm.
co-regulation is distinct from codependency, right?
That's right.
It's a really distinct need. And when you think about when we are growing up,
Yeah,
personal relationships, romantic relationships are not the embodiment of our caregivers, but they as close as possible, like
yeah,
are held in the same kind of regard as sort of critical relationships.
yes,
And when we are young, the job of our parents or our caregivers was to regulate us because we did not have the capacity as infants
yes,
to regulate ourselves. So the job of a parent is to build in the care and the
that's right.
soothing and all of the techniques so that the baby's body can sort of be at rest and be soothed and comforted.
Yeah,
And then as
yes,
you grow older, you sort of learn how to sort of regulate your own body from a sense of self. You realize you're separate, that you have
yes,
your own needs and your own desires, and not everyone will match them. And there's a sort of unraveling of But when we come back into romantic relationships, there's again a need for us to sort of be together
Yes,
and to regulate our emotions together.
that's
So I'd
right.
love for you to talk, if you want to talk a little bit more about
Oh,
that, because I
it's
think
so fun. Yeah.
this is a great thing, because there's this cultural narrative right now, which is like, handle your stuff, your
Yeah.
problems are your own, handle your own things. And it's like, oh, well, fuck, are we two individuals in this relationship? Are we like doing shit together, And
Yeah.
you actually introduced me to a beautiful book. It's called Wired for Love by Stan Tankin,
Yeah.
which really talks about this. I kind of like
Yeah.
stole the Wired for Threat, Wired for Love,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
where it's like, no, this is what relationships are about,
That's right.
like to really bring each other back to love and connection. So please
Yeah.
take it away.
Well, for those people that are familiar with the terms of attachment, the anxious people who are listening are like, "Yes, that's right,
Yes.
that's right. Oh my God, of course we are. I've been trying to tell
Yeah.
my partner and my family this." Those who have more avoidant attachment styles are just like, "Ooh, hold on,
Yeah.
hold on." So
What
there's
am
a
I responsible for? I can't be responsible, right?
and what that is there's a lot to say about that. So
Mhm.
I'm really careful. I have this interesting mix of both attachment styles within me, a bit of a disorganized, which is again what I would say about that is we're all getting back to the truth of how we can thrive together. And I love Stan Tatkin. Terry Reel's another wonderful force out there that's talking about we seem to have turned into a species of rugged individuals. Underneath that, I love when he says that, but underneath that, I have a lot of compassion for those who have more avoidant attachment
Mhm.
styles where relationship is very overwhelming. Close
Mhm.
relationship dysregulates. There aren't the like you said, there aren't the pathways. There wasn't the early created neural pathways of safety in
Yeah.
closeness.
Mhm.
So there's a lot to do there, a lot of work to do there. And the truth is, whether some of us, parts of me, I'll say some parts of me like it or not, I can't be an Amazonian woman out there regulating myself and saving the world. That some of us have to learn to lean in safely to connection because we're social, we're ultra social. And truth be told, when we think we're self regulating, and this has been a beautiful thing for me to learn, we still have some image of a human somewhere in our brain that's helping us in self regulation. So there's really a lot, people would say there's no such thing as self regulation, which is really
Mm.
mind blowing.
Mhm.
What I think that really is that we as an individual can be by ourselves and find regulation tools so we're not over leaning on others. And to what you said, others are essential. Others are essential. And, Dr. Dan Siegel has a term now. He calls it MWE. It's the idea that we're interconnected or intraconnected. That's the truth of who we are as a species. I know it doesn't always feel that way, and that it's me and we, and that he loves the term we, that
Mm.
we are here together to love. And there's listen, I used to go to codependence meetings as a kid. So I'm really familiar with that. I still sometimes say, watch your codependent issues, Danielle, watch your codependency. I think we're switching. There's a great book called interdependent. No, sorry, Prodependence. That's
Mm.
a really great book. It's taking attachment and what we know about adult attachment, and it's blending it
Mhm.
into how sometimes if we go too far into I'm codependent, I need to pull away from relationship. That can sometimes be at our own detriment. So it's really interesting to start to question what safe relationship is, knowing that we need safe relationship, and again, not to over lean on our relationships. So it's
Mhm.
complicated, but
Yeah.
summary is we need safe relationships to survive and thrive.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whether we like it or not, those same infant needs that we had, whether they were met or not, they carry into our relationships as adults. It sucks, guys. I mean, part of me is like, damn it, I thought I could like get past that. I could be my own
Mhm.
woman. And it's like, we still need people. In
Yeah.
fact, we more than need them. We thrive with them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's something so it's so the reason why relationships, our adult romantic relationships,
Yeah.
become like these sort of this like crucible, right, on which we are
Yeah.
we're like, because what we're really doing is facing our attachment styles
Yeah.
of our childhood.
That's right.
And we often will be paired with someone who
Hmm.
will be in sort of contrast with our attachment style.
Yeah.
And the goal of these of that, if you're finding it as a healthy relationship, maybe it's not, hopefully it's not a toxic, but if you're feeling triggered by each other, it's oftentimes you're pulling at the poles of attachment style. And what you said with this,
Right.
which was anxious who really, really overleans on others
Yeah.
to regulate themselves, and avoidant who wants to lean out when someone is trying to regulate. They do better when they are they're overly independent around, staying connected with themselves, and are
Yeah.
afraid to feel smothered. So you
Yes.
have these two
Mm.
ideas inside of relationship: one person who's afraid to be like left, and the other person who's afraid to be engulfed,
Yes.
by another. And I think Esther Perel talks about this. She's like, and these two
Yeah.
people meet and fall in love. And so,
That's exactly right.
and then the work, and then some real work begins, because this could be
Yes.
extraordinarily healing, where you
Yes.
both can kind of, it's both responsibility to kind of move towards the center, which
Yes.
feels a little bit more nuanced and and balanced.
Yes.
And if you can get there, then you really can feel free, right?
Yes.
You're
Oh,
not
yeah.
at the whims of your attachment styles anymore.
It's true. No, it's true. So, and imagine, add into the whole idea that here we are operating in intimate relationship, and our attachment style gets triggered most specifically in our intimate relationships, but also in other relationships.
Hmm.
But combine the fact that we're monitoring that and being kind of at the whim of that, and also highly dysregulated nervous systems,
Hmm.
and then add into that a lot of the work that's coming out, thank God, around how our modern culture kind of commandeers our brain through the high levels of novelty and the dopamine seeking that every single one of us, for the most part, do.
Hmm.
And so there's all these factors of just being human that affect all of it, and
Yeah.
so it's complicated. And we really I mean, there's always this beautiful, like you said, imagine as the avoidant is learning to lean in safely towards relationship, and the anxious partner, and I'm generalizing, the
Hmm.
anxious partner is learning to lean on more than just that partner. So the anxious partner finds another secure group of people that can kind of meet the needs, so the avoidant partner isn't just overwhelmed by all of that beautiful relationship energy.
Right.
And then, of course, we didn't really talk about the disorganized style, which is really just someone who's actively experiencing trauma triggering a lot of the time. So really, it's complicated.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's nice for me to kind of, in my own life with my clients and my own healing, to just go back to put all that aside, and let's just figure out the creature that I am today and how I can start to help myself change the patterning of my fight, flight, shutdown mechanisms, so I can bring myself into the valley of green and start
Right.
to. So it's sometimes nice to come back there and start
Mm.
to really deeply revamp how we care for ourselves,
Hmm.
and ask people to help us care
Yeah.
for ourselves. Because,
Yes.
oh God forbid we say,
Hmm.
hey, can you help me, or can I explain to you now what I know about my nervous system? And when I come over your house, I didn't realize how affected I was by the loud music, and I'm just learning, could we turn that
Hmm.
down so I could
Mm.
calm? Like little things like that, we can bring
Yeah.
others in to help us and share our nervous system, what helps to help it be calm, and then also get to know our partner's nervous systems. Like, be very
Mm.
curious about that.
Yes.
It's good.
Yes. It's wonderful. I lost my train of thought, but I had something recently. Well, this is what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
The idea is to, for me now, is to buid a window of tolerance, like
Yeah. Oh,
expand my
yeah.
window
Yeah.
of tolerance, which means
Yes.
exploring the edges of the comfort of my nervous system. So
Mm,
if I'm feeling under threat, I can catch myself in this moment saying like, okay, I could amplify this threat and like go into sort of
yeah.
patterns of thought patterns and body patterns that would amplify this, or I could really um,
Mm,
slow down, to do some somatic work that keeps
mm,
me more regulated and be able to sort of hold this for longer. So
Yeah.
You
Can
know,
you tell me more of like, so since you're saying that, that's what helps, what have you found helps you in the process that you're in somatically to kind of just stop that old
yes.
patterning and come back? What has helped you?
Well, some of it is doing a lot, most of it is doing a lot of work outside of the trigger that is happening.
Mm,
So, for
okay.
instance,
Yeah.
building, I know people are like, oh, fucking daily practices, blah, 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 right? But
No.
rarely, no, but a lot of people like it,
Mm,
it feels like this, okay, but what is this really doing? Now
yeah.
I know what it's really doing. When I do my
Yes.
daily practice,
Yes.
it's there for when I'm feeling triggered, right? So
Yes.
I'm doing that, and these very small amounts, daily meditations,
Great.
moving my body every day,
Yep.
like very slowly and mindfully, breath work, doing
Yeah.
body check-ins
Great.
periodically throughout the day. So just building this intimate relationship with my body,
Mm,
my emotions, and then being able to see where I can regulate when there's really no threats. Like I could be walking around during
yeah.
the day and my ringer could go off, and it's a reminder to kind of center. And then
Oh,
my ringer goes off, and I noticed that I was like this, and I was like, why am I like this? There's nothing going on. And then I it's a
yeah.
great reminder to be like, okay, breathe. But very curious that I was just walking around today like all amped up and everything
Yeah.
was fine.
Yes.
So I start building this, kind of, I can pull myself back pretty quickly when I
Wow.
practice that.
No, that's great. I mean, I love that. I'm also just kind of feeling into that, and
Hmm.
just you giving examples helps me too, because it's like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. I should bring that one back. And
Just presence,
yeah,
like,
that's it. That's it.
saying like I can like look, I can even just sort of breathe and kind of look around my room.
Yes.
Closing
See,
the eyes is
okay.
okay too, but
Yes.
it's nice to actually build presence of the where I am and not go
Yeah.
into my head. So I'm just
Yeah.
noticing, and it's a minute.
Yeah. See, that's it. And
Yeah.
that's doable for any of us, especially for
Hmm.
those of us who are like, where the hell am I going to put that in? I have my
Hmm.
kids, or I have my clients, or I have to, so just a minute. It's
Hmm.
just 1 minute that
Yeah.
you just oriented, you used
Hmm.
your visual sense to just say, I'm here,
Hmm.
I'm now, and you relax your shoulders
Hmm.
and you're like, wow, it's like you're starting to really attune on those deep levels. And it's a big deal. I think, and that's why a lot of the mindfulness uh, modalities and the mindfulness work is so important, because if we can come back to the present, we can, whether we've been in the past or we're, in the future, it's like, no, right here, right now. And it starts to build and grow,
Yeah.
little steps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
is it from the Navy SEALs, which is I referenced them earlier in almost in a slightly interesting way. This actually is what they're
Yeah.
saying is you don't rise to the challenge, you fall back on your training. So
Oh, there we go. Oh, I
something to
like
that
this.
effect, which is it's just
Yeah.
interesting because
Yeah.
um, if you are proactively taking care of yourself, your
Yeah.
resilience is you're building your resilience.
Absolutely.
So that's what we need.
Yeah, I love that. There's actually a lot of people that do a lot of study of military groups, because they do, uh, aside from our politics,
Hmm.
they do a lot of things that are secure functioning,
Hmm.
and there's a lot that they do right that we can learn from, and I love that you brought that up. I think that we are building, yeah, we're building a lot of these tools, and it happens over time, and to be really gentle with ourselves. And all of these practices are, think about it, like all of the bad habits are wired in. Okay,
Hmm.
fine, great. And as we're switching our strategies, we're in a sense, if you think of a road, some of these strategies and some of these ways that we're being, it's like a super highway. It's what we're
Hmm.
used to doing. It's how we're used to being. But as we're doing the healing, we're paving these roads. The neural
Hmm.
connections are a little smaller, but if we keep going step
Right.
by step, practice by practice, finding the ones that work and being okay with switching them up. Because those who have had trauma, it's funny, I wanted to mention this earlier, real quick. When I started getting into meditation, maybe 10 years ago, I just started realizing I wasn't enjoying it. I'd close my eyes, I'd get really tense, and I felt like, wow, I suck at this. And I
Hmm.
couldn't slow my mind. And one thing I loved learning, and I actually now teach, is that really meet yourself where you're at. You might not be, your nervous system might actually get dysregulated by sitting, closing your eyes, and
Mhm.
forcing calm. You might be someone who actually wants to do moving meditation, Tai Chi, Qigong. You might want to go out and just take a walk. Like you, so really don't force something. And I'm still working on doing that for myself. It's like, no, meditation isn't working right now, Danielle.
Mhm.
Go out and take a walk. So really just to be with where you're at and what helps. People, when they go to the gym on some level, they get to focus on what they're doing, their reps, their sets, and they feel not only a physiological release, but their mind had calm for that hour because they
Yeah.
were focusing. So
Mm.
really, really meet yourself there and don't just say, I should be, why can't I focus? It's like, maybe not yet.
Mm.
Maybe
Yeah.
not yet.
That's a great point because I think there's a lot of times in trauma, what
Yeah.
needs to happen is you need to sort of close the loop
Yeah.
on an
Great.
experience, and you
That's right.
so it wouldn't necessarily be beneficial for someone to sit still if
Mhm.
your body wants to sort of run and sort of release
That's
energy.
right. That's exactly right.
So tuning into that, it's like if I'm feeling anxious and I need to run or get something out and I need to
Yeah.
move,
Yes.
that would be the most beneficial way of sort of closing the loop.
Perfect. And I think that for those of you that look at the chart and realize that you've been living a lot up in that blue zone, you're going to need a lot more. Yeah. So if you're up there, if you are in and out of that zone, you're going to need a lot more mobilization
Hmm.
movements because your
Yeah.
body has been in a freeze. Even if it's functioning, even if you've still been taking care of everybody and doing your job, it does not have to be you're in bed. So if you find that you have been living there chronically or that you tend to go there under high, high stress, you're going to want to say, I'm stressed. Let myself move. Let my
Hmm.
body move. For anyone that's had any type of major trauma around not being able to leave places that were unsafe,
Hmm.
what I would
Right.
tell you is the greatest thing to do is not to force yourself to sit or stay. Actually liberate yourself to just go. Just go.
Yeah.
Get in your car. Go. Go take a walk.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
move.
it's not always about down regulating. It's not always
Yeah,
about down regulating or bringing yourself. It's sometimes it's about maybe up regulating or sort of
that's right.
bringing sort of arousal to the
That's right.
system,
That's right.
in a different way. So that's an important
Yeah.
distinction. Thank you for that.
Yeah, and then that's something I wish I apologize for not saying that sooner because you use different breaths to really move yourself in and
Mhm.
out of these zones. So you want a
Mhm.
relaxing breath if you're way up there, a breath to bring yourself down if you're way up there in the sympathetic. And you're going to want movement and more of an energizing breath to bring yourself out of a freeze state.
Right.
Um,
So
yeah,
breath work could really be to down regulate or up regulate depending on the type of breath work that you're doing.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even question that for those of you that have this extensive. This is the fun part. This is where I can get creative because this is a lot. And really that whole question of for some of my clients who really have really strong personas in the world and are accomplished or just are really who they are, it's like I feel like some of this work is a step back. I really do. I really want to like admit to myself that I don't feel safe, and what does that mean about me? And so it can be unsettling, but what I can tell you is that it's not a step backwards. It's actually a step into who you
Mhm.
are. That this is the pathway to not only feeling your best, but also connecting more deeper
Mm.
and allowing all the healing that you're doing to really have a space. Because if we're up there in blue or red, any healing we're doing, in a sense, our brain isn't even capable. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's why we want to work on the stress levels first.
Right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
think it was Peter Levine. I think
Mm,
it was him in Waking the Tiger, which is,
mm,
when you're if you've been disconnected from a body part or from your emotions or from your body and you live
yeah,
sort of a very cerebral life, you've probably done that because some
yeah,
traumatic event asked you to disengage from your.
yes,
So
yes,
if you're doing work like this, if you're doing trauma work or you're doing any kind of sort of somatic work, the first sensations might feel painful. It's
that's
it's
right.
similar like if you slept on your arm all night and your arm starts waking up and you have all the
Mm,
pins and needles.
that's it.
It's the same thing.
Mm.
It's painful, but at least there's now aliveness coming back into this, right? And
Yes,
so it maybe it was you were functioning with like sort of this disengaged arm, but now you actually have the arm at your disposal. But
perfect.
it may take a moment for your body to feel a sense of safety again, because it is
Mhm.
highly activated at some when you're doing somatic based trauma work.
Yeah. That is the greatest point ever. And I definitely, within my own life, and again with clients, it's like there will be a period when we get back into the
Where you
body,
feel
and
a hot mess. You're like, everything's
oh,
wrong.
please. And in fact, I think again, that's maybe where we haven't been really honest, or I felt
Yes. Yeah,
I
yeah,
wasn't being given the truth.
yeah.
It's like, why do I feel worse? Because
Mhm.
we haven't been embodied. We have been living in these functional frozen places in collapse. And so just expect, but then that's why we surround ourselves with a secure network. Just expect that doesn't mean you're not doing it right. Doesn't mean you've done
Mhm.
something wrong. You're coming back into what it feels like. Like you have
Mhm.
been numb, and then sensation comes back in. Blood flow starts to, it doesn't feel good. You're right. When I
Mhm.
wake up, that doesn't feel great. You have to
Mhm.
shake it out. You have to kind of let everything balance again. So
Yeah.
to be really gentle, because that is absolutely to be expected when you are committed to healing and growth.
Mm.
It won't always be joyful and blissful, and that's part of it. So
Mhm.
keep
Yes.
going, and keep finding the people that can really walk with you in safety, and then it's a journey. I love when people always talk about the metaphor of the mountain and Mount Everest, and it's like, do you think those, I mean, listen, I do you think it's not easy? And we know that from these climbers that go up and have to risk a lot. And it's like there's lack of oxygen, and some people, it's just,
Mhm.
give ourselves credit and really
Yeah.
slow into softening into, oh, there's a song, it's called I don't remember. I'm not always good in the moment to remember names, but there's this beautiful line that says, I wish we'd live like we're made of glass.
Mhm.
But if you actually heard the melodic way this male voice talks about it, I had this image of a beautiful sacred stained glass that I saw in Chicago at a museum. And I just thought, I was in awe of that. It was sacred. I would never have run around it or thrown balls around it, or, it's almost like, can we just take these parts of us and start to really take the softness and the fragility and honor it,
Mhm.
instead of like shove it down, or
Mhm.
we're beautiful in our fragility. Sting said so. I'm all into
Mhm.
music. It's like, listen to that song, Fragile. Oh my
Yes.
God.
Yeah. Mm. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
beautiful.
It is. It
Oh,
is.
I would love to talk more about this. This is like our I know we both love nerding out about
We
this
do.
around
I
the
know.
way that we are showing, the way our nervous system is regulated, and our capacity to show up in the world, our capacity to show up for our relationships. And
Yeah. Yeah.
even though you and I are not perfect, like we're active students of
That's
our
right.
own work. But
Yes.
it does bring a capacity to actually be very tolerant of other people's dysregulation
Yeah.
without taking it on as our own. And I think I don't want to speak for you, but I imagine that you've developed that
No.
sense of separating, like when someone is dysregulated, I can hold, there's like this, like almost like matrix, like I don't need to get involved
Yeah.
in this. I don't need to take this on. Where as
Yeah.
before, maybe like there's the snap thing that they said to me, and then I'm snapping back, and then
Right.
and then we're off to the races.
Yes.
It does bring a capacity to actually help be the source of strength in yourself and then for others, so you don't have to feel like
Yeah.
you're always on a wild ride, that other
Yeah.
people highly influence you.
No, that's exactly right. I think that's been one of, I mean, you said that very well. It's been one of the greatest gifts for me to, again, not take others and their behavior, because if I look at them as a dysregulated nervous system,
Mhm.
and have compassion around the being that they are based on what they went through, it's like I can create an impersonal space,
Mhm.
which isn't easy, because then
Yeah.
attachment comes in, and we
Mhm.
get, but I think that's the beauty of this psychobiological education, is that we can say, wow, what if I just viewed my partner as a stress system, and this is the patterns when this person's stressed, and this is how I'm stressed,
Mhm.
and that there's a way to meet each other there, instead of personalizing it or
Yeah.
blaming or shaming or running away,
Yeah.
or fighting,
Yes.
or fawning, all those fun words.
Mhm.
But I loved that you said that. Yeah, this is a lot, and we're all in it together, and we're all meant to do this together.
Mhm.
So it's just, we're here. We're doing it.
Mm. Well, I would love to stop here. I feel like we should definitely
Yeah.
have another conversation around this because I know there's more around, especially around the romantic aspects of how, like
Mm,
you've just brought up the beautiful topic of, you know, when we have our stress responses, that's often
yeah.
where we have our conflict because we're both like actors in our play. We're like,
Yeah.
enter Danielle who questions everything, and then enter Christina who takes everything negative, and you know, like,
That's right.
and here
Yes.
play scene, you know. And
That's
so
right.
we're very patternized in our way we interact with our
We
partners,
are.
and that
We are.
if you can like you said so beautifully, depersonalize that as not as a threat to
Yes.
you but as their way of coping with the world,
That's
then
right.
you can actually create a lot of healing in your relationship.
It also regulates you a bit when you can, like,
Mhm.
make
Yes.
it a little less personal. It's like, oh,
Yeah.
I like you said, I can create space,
Yeah.
and that space is amazing. But yeah,
Yes.
that's right. Mhm.
Well, Danielle, thank you so much for your knowledge and wisdom,
You're
and
welcome.
also your deep compassion for on this topic, which I
Thank
think
you.
we really need less judgment, more compassion,
Please,
and
yes, please.
yes. And I would love for you, you know, to tell people what you've got going on. How can they reach you if they want to know more, work with you? Because you are a coach on this. You teach people
Yeah,
around their nervous system resiliency, around attachment
yeah,
styles, being a personal coach to people. So let
yeah.
people know how they can connect with you.
I'm a bit old fashioned, so you can connect with me on Facebook, Danielle Ivans Fishman. I work in a counseling center, so I work in person with people. I do virtual work with people all over the place, and I love doing the one on one work and journeying with people. So please just reach out on Facebook. And if it feels like it would be supportive, the journeying is probably my favorite thing to do. And I also have worked with organizations and just go in and love to be this educator to just sometimes just knowing these things, and this is top down again, but just knowing these things can kind of make us go, oh, got it.
Mhm.
I
Yes.
can just take a little pressure off.
Mm.
So sometimes just that is very regulating. So
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
it's it's wonderful to understand that, those spaces. So yeah,
Mm.
that's it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And if you're interested in working similarly, but really with the body, bringing the body back into your regulated states, connecting with the somatic experience of you living in a body and seeing how that can really change how you cognitively relate to the world, going from this again bottom up approach. I would love to. You can also consider working with me as well, and we can talk further. And in the meantime, I'm wishing all of you a beautiful summer day. It's
Yeah,
Friday, and a
I
beautiful
know.
weekend,
Yes.
and make it a regulated one.
Yes. Be gentle with those beautiful stained glass hearts.
Yes.
Okay.
And we'll speak soon. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.